If you watch my channel, then you know that I am always trying new things in terms of lures, tackle, and techniques. And over the past couple of years, the biggest game changer in terms of my fishing success has been this, the Tush by Core Tackle. First, I'll just list some of the more obvious or well-known advantages of the Tush. For starters, the weight is hidden inside of the soft plastic, giving it a more natural appearance. Number two, distributing that weight inside of the soft plastic causes it to fall more horizontally and slowly, adding to that natural appearance. Number three, weighting the swim bait internally allows it to remain parallel to the bottom on a slower retrieve and also adds to the wobble or side-to-side roll of the bait. And that slower wobbling action is a better imitation of a struggling or dying bait fish. And number four, weighting the swim bait internally also creates a balance throughout the body of the bait, which makes it easier to skip across the surface of the water. Now, the Tush isn't a new thing, but while these advantages that I just listed are well known, especially to the Tush addicts out there like myself, there is more to the Tush than meets the eye. The Tush is the first piece of tackle that I can comfortably say I have fully unlocked, that I have mastered. And in today's video, I'm going to be sharing all of my tips, tricks, and original hacks and modifications with you. This will be the best and most comprehensive video you have seen on the Tush since Sir Mix-a-Lot's timeless classic, Baby Got Back. And we're going to get right into it, but before we do, if you guys do enjoy the video today or learn something of value here, I'd appreciate it if you'd like, comment, or subscribe. It helps the channel grow. There are three different ways to rig your swim bait on the Tush, and within each different rigging method, there are ways to control the falling action and the wobble of your bait with strategic weight positioning. The first way to rig the Tush is to nose rig the swim bait by inserting the hook point through the nose of the swim bait. This method allows for faster retrieval speeds because the weight is further forward in the swim bait, and the exposed hook shank in front of the bait also helps it to deflect over hard objects like rocks. For these reasons, I most often use this rigging method when I'm fishing in warmer water situations where a faster retrieval speed is more ideal, or when I'm fishing along hard bottoms like riprap. This is also the method that I'll use when I'm fishing in a slow-moving creek or a river, anytime there is a slow current, because having that weight a little more forward in the plastic prevents it from being blown out in the current. But if the current is faster, if I'm fishing in a swiftly moving creek or river, I'll typically opt for a more traditional weight-forward style of jig head where the weight is entirely in front of that plastic. Alright, the second way to rig a swim bait on the Tush is to top rig the bait by inserting the hook point through the top of the soft plastic. And this method produces the slowest, most natural horizontal falling action of the three methods. This method isn't very well suited for a steady retrieve, but it's perfectly suited for a jigging or yo-yo style retrieve where you're lifting the rod tip, lifting that bait up off the bottom, and letting it fall back down horizontally. This method is one I most often use in the late fall or early winter to imitate a dying shad, and with each lift of the rod tip, the bait will fall back down horizontally with a wobbling action that is absolutely irresistible to all predators. Alright, the third and my most commonly used rigging method with the Tush is to apex rig the bait. And if you're wondering what that means, don't worry, it is a term I made up, but I'll explain it to you. If we take a look here at the nose of a swim bait and draw a dividing line right down the middle of the bait's body, you'll see we have a top curve and a bottom curve that is formed at the nose of the swim bait. And I want to look specifically at that top curve. To apex rig the bait means to insert the hook point at the apex or highest point of the top curve. Put simply, this is the exact middle ground between front rigging and top rigging the swim bait. This method grants most of the benefits of both of the other rigging methods. It allows for that slow, wobbling, steady retrieve, along with a natural, slow falling action. This is easily the most versatile of the three rigging methods and also the best one for coming through light vegetation such as grass. Overall, this rigging method produced more fish for me last year than any other presentation in my arsenal. Alright, now within each rigging method, weight positioning plays a critical role in determining the action of the bait. First, I want to address what I think is the most commonly expressed issue when I look in the comments section of other videos and posts about the Tush, and that is that the bait swims upside down or it falls over to one side. And these are problems that are very easily fixed, and I'm going to show you how to do that right now. The answer, of course, is in the positioning of the weight. So right now, let's take a look at a cross-section of a swim bait, and we're going to mark the center with a vertical and horizontal line. The weight of your tush should always fall on this vertical line below the bait's center. Positioning the weight to the left or right of this vertical line will result in the bait falling over to one side, and positioning the weight above the bait's center will cause it to ride upside down. For these reasons, the top two quadrants here are what I'm going to refer to as the no-no zone. This is where you never want to position your weight. Now, what if we position the weight directly through the bait's center? Well, it's going to give you some great wobbling action on a steady retrieve, but now when the bait falls on slacked line, it's going to fall upside down, and that is because of the weight of the hook itself. So just something to keep in mind. So ultimately, if you want to get the best action out of your swim bait while using the tush, you want to stick to that vertical line below the bait's center. Now, throughout this viable weight positioning zone, you can actually dictate how much wobble the bait will have. The higher you position your weight within this viable zone, the more exaggerated the wobbling action will be, both on the fall and on the retrieve. And the lower you position your weight within this viable zone, the tighter the wobbling action will be. And the best possible position for your weight, in my experience, is going to be right in the center of that viable zone. That is what I call the sweet spot. That's going to give you your most consistent action on both your falls and retrieves, and just the right amount of wobble. Alright, now that you have a deep understanding of how to rig the tush, let's talk about my favorite baits and combinations. As mentioned before, the tush creates a more natural appearance in part by concealing the weight inside of the swim bait, and I like to lean into that by pairing it with some ultra-realistic swim baits. I really like the baits that have natural colors and color patterns and match the present forage, and having realistic features and eyes are also a bonus. My most productive swim baits with the tush have been those with solid, round bodies and round heads, like your standard Kitex, the Fat Swing Impact Kitex in particular, your Rage Swimmers, or like your Sixth Sense Divine Swim Baits. You know the shape I'm talking about. And within this group of swim baits, my preference changes seasonally. So when it's colder and I need to fish slower in the wintertime, I'll opt for something like a Kitec, a softer swim bait, because it gets that nice wide tail kick at a slower speed. But in the warmer months where I don't have to fish extremely slow, I'll tend to favor a tougher plastic like a Sixth Sense Divine swim bait. Those get a better tail kick at faster speeds, and they also happen to be more durable. They'll last you through a few fish, whereas the Kitecs tend to get destroyed on the first bite. Now, my most productive specific combinations with the tush were as follows. In the colder months, a 1/8 ounce 2-aught tush paired with a 3.8 or 3.3 inch Fat Swing Impact Kitec swim bait. And in the warmer months, a 1/4 ounce 4-aught tush paired with a 4.4 inch Divine swim bait by Sixth Sense. These two combinations caught me a ton of fish and a variety of species, and some very big fish all throughout the year. And if you have these two combinations and strategically match your colors to the forage that is present, you can catch fish in any body of water, even in highly pressured areas, all throughout the year. Now, obviously, these aren't the only two sizes of the tush available, and there are going to be times where in addition to adapting the color to match the present forage, you'll also want to adapt the size to match the forage. So just to make it a little bit easier for you to pair the correct size of tush with the right size of swim bait, I'll put a little size chart right up here on the screen. Alright, while we're on the subject of swim bait compatibility, let's move on to our first hack. The tush is compatible with all solid body swim baits, but it is not compatible with slotted swim baits. The weight of the tush effectively serves as the hook's bait keeper, so it sits inside of that open slot when it's paired with a slotted swim bait, which renders it basically useless as a bait keeper. If you have a favorite slotted swim bait that you'd like to pair with the tush, such as this hyper-realistic perch pattern Storm Largo shad, you can make it compatible by fusing the belly slot of the swim bait. All you need to do is to heat up a standard butter knife on an open flame for about 30 seconds and then insert the butter knife into the belly slot and hold it there for about 8 to 10 seconds. Then remove the knife and hold the slot together for about 30 seconds using firm, even pressure. Once you have fused that belly slot together, your swim bait is now compatible with the tush. This is something I do often when I want to use a specific color pattern, and you'll see here I have a whole pack of fused perch Largo shads because this is likely the most realistic perch color pattern in a finesse swim bait on the entire market. Now, my next hack is a fun one, and it's something that was inspired by something on the Core Tackle website. If you look at the tush options, you'll see that there is a limited edition painted red version of the tush that you can use, and you can pair this with translucent swim baits, and it creates kind of an internal hotspot that sight-based predators can key in on. When I saw this, I thought to myself, why don't I just take some Pro-Tec powder paint and paint up some tushes for myself? Or why don't I take it a step even further and use some glowing Pro-Tec powder paint? That's right, you can use some glowing Pro-Tec powder paint to create an internal glow effect within translucent swim baits that helps predators key in on them in low light situations. There are already glowing swim baits and glowing jig heads out there, but this slightly muted internal glow effect will be more subtle and more natural than those other options. Pardon the mid-video beard trim, I was starting to look homeless. Okay, hack number 3. This hack involves another unique piece of terminal tackle, the Switchblade by Queen Tackle. The Switchblade can be paired with the tush to create an internally weighted swim bait or internally weighted jig. And as far as baits are concerned with this presentation, you can certainly pair it with a paddle tail swim bait, and that's going to give you two very distinct vibrations within the same presentation. But what I really like to do is to pair it with a chatterbait trailer style of bait, like a spunk shad or a Savage Gear dragon tail slug. These traditional chatterbait trailers are going to give you a very erratic hunting action, and I have found them to be very effective for bass, but especially for northern pike. This switchblade and tush combination also gives you a couple of distinct advantages over a traditional chatterbait. Because the bait is weighted internally, it has a more natural appearance, but more importantly, when you kill the retrieve, the bait won't nosedive like it does with a traditional chatterbait. Instead, the bait will fall more horizontally and naturally, which across the board is really the biggest advantage and difference maker overall with the tush. Alright, now my fourth and final hack was inspired by a request that I sent to Core Tackle, which was denied. I sent them an email requesting a smaller version of the tush for use with micro swim baits in the 2-inch to 2.5-inch range. Now my request was denied, and I believe rightfully so, because most bass fishermen aren't looking to fish micro swim baits because they're trying to catch bigger fish, but I'm not strictly a bass fisherman, and I saw this as being potentially a very deadly presentation for other species like crappie or perch. So I decided to create my own custom micro tushes, and I accomplished this without pouring any lead. I ordered some size 1 and size 2 jig hooks and some 0.035-inch spooled lead wire. And then I simply took that spooled lead wire and wrapped it around the hook shank, securing it in place with some thread. And that's all it takes to make your own micro tush. But at this point, you can be creative, and using some different materials, you can add some color or some flash to your micro tush for the insides of those transparent or translucent micro swim baits. And using some thick hard formula UV glow resin by Solarez, I have even created some micro tushes that glow in the freaking dark. Alright, I'm going to leave you with one final tip that tremendously improved my hook to land ratio with the tush. When you first start using the tush, one of the main things that you'll notice is that you get bit on the fall a lot more frequently. The very first time that I used the tush out on Lake St. Clair, I got bit on the fall an absurd number of times. It was about a third of my bites that happened on the fall. And I missed some of those bites on the fall. And the reason that I missed them is because I was using braided line, which floats. So I was making long casts, the bait was hitting the water and slowly and naturally falling down to the bottom, and it would peel that braided line off the surface as it sank down, creating a large arc in the line. Now, once the bait hits the bottom and you start your retrieve, that arc becomes less of a problem because the drag created by your swim bait allows that braided line to sink and to straighten out, so you have a more direct contact with your bait. The problem is when you get bit on the fall, you still have that arc in your line, and that can cause you to not be able to detect the bite because you don't have a straight line direct connection to your bait. But the good news is I looked for a solution to this problem and I found one, and it is sinking braided line. More specifically, Daiwa X Braid sinking braided line. This type of braided line sinks as your bait falls, and while it doesn't sink in a perfectly linear fashion, it greatly reduces that arc, allowing you to maintain a more direct connection with your bait and to detect those bites that happen on the fall. Sinking braid has been such a game changer for me that it has now become the line that I use for all of my subsurface finesse techniques. And I would go as far as to say that now that sinking braided line exists, regular floating braided line is now the incorrect line to use for all subsurface finesse techniques. And when I say subsurface finesse technique, I'm talking about any finesse techniques that are fished below the surface of the water. So I'm talking about finesse swim baits, the wacky rig, the Nico rig, weightless flukes, anything like that. For all of those techniques, sinking braided line makes a huge difference in your bite detection. All right, that's going to do it for the video, and I know that was a lot of information about something that is ultimately very simple, the Core Tackle TUSH, but in terms of terminal tackle, it has been the biggest difference maker for me over the past several years. It is an incredibly important tool in my arsenal, and I just wanted to share it with you. So I hope you guys enjoyed the video. There will be more videos like this to come, and I'll see you in the next one.